Rev up your engines! Here's a warning you can learn from a guy's mistake. That's why he brought his car here. He bought this Lexus ES 350 2008 used for about $8,000. And unfortunately, the guy that he brought, who said he was a mechanic, didn't know what he was doing and didn't check the car out correctly. You need a mechanic like me to check out any car, but especially a Lexus. He didn't know how to analyze the automatic transmission. With one of these machines, we can go into the transmissions, we can do bi-directional testing, we can see all the data that's going on. And we know the transmission suspect, you say, you don't buy the car. It also reminds me of a man who brought me a Lexus he bought used in Tennessee last year. He brings it over and he says, Scotty, it's not running right. He shows it's misfiring. So I pulled out a couple of spark plugs. I'm like, wow, these things are just covered in burnt oil. And of course, it's a V6 engine where the backside, you can't get to the spark plugs without taking the intake manifold. So it's this humongously insane job. I got it running better, but I told him, I said, you got screwed. You paid $8,500 for a car that the engine's burning oil like no tomorrow, and it's going to eventually clog it up and run bad. He bought it at a Lexus dealer, and he thought, oh yeah, you know, they check them out. Baloney, they don't do anything in most of those places. They bring them in, they sell them, and out they go. But in his case, the transmission went out a month after he bought it. He was putting it in the manual shifting, and he noticed it didn't work right. And then eventually, it wouldn't even move on its own. So you really want to get a guy check out the transmission in any car, but especially one of these. Now, at least he got somewhat lucky because someone else's bad luck helped him out. There was a wrecked Lexus in a junkyard. He got the transmission out of it, $2,500, and he found an honest mechanic like me around here who put it in for $500. The one that he bought was from a wreck that only had 50,000 miles, and it goes perfectly fine because they wanted $8,000 at the dealership for a remanufactured transmission installed on it, which of course is even more than the book. I looked at my book and it should be a couple thousand less than that, but you know, that is because they always add stuff on. So he would have had to pay to replace the transmission what he paid for the whole car. Instead, he found one in the salvage yard. Smart move. This car was there. It had 50,000 miles on it. It works fine now, and he found a guy to put it in for $500. It's not rocket science. You just pull a bunch of crap off, put a bunch of crap back on. You probably wouldn't do it yourself because you don't have a cherry picker to pick up the engine, but you could if you wanted to rent one or buy one at Harbor Freight Tool for $150. Point is, you don't want to get in this situation in the first place. You got to have a guy who can check the transmission out before. Now, as you can see, the previous owner was whirly. Look at all these cracks. Well, that is one of those stupid plastic covers that you put the plastic on. It supposedly keeps the paint from getting chipped. Well, there's still chips, but it looks horrible. And the problem is, you try to get the stuff off without ruining the hood, it is almost impossible. And for some weird reason, the guy also did it on the side view mirror. And you can see it's coming off here. I mean, some people have really squirrely ideas. Now, he loves the car otherwise. I mean, yeah, the leather's going to be a little cracky. It's not ripped or anything. The interior still looks good. Got a nice comfy back seat. He's got all this junk in it. What does he care? You can fit all kinds of stuff in these. They're comfy cars. And, of course, it's made in Japan. Listen to the solid door. They're solid cars. Nice looking cars. Got the old sunroof. We'll start it up. Now, it's an older car, but he added all this in. Everything that he wanted to add to Amazon. But he added it to the original system. Now, he did pay $600. It's called Grom V-Line. Because he wanted to keep this all stock. Well, these things are so popular that this Grom V-Line company makes a kit where you keep it all here, but you get all the modern stuff, even though it's an older car. People want something. There's always tech guys out there that'll come up with stuff like that. You can get what you want without having to buy another car. Now, would you rather buy a brand new one of these for a whole bunch of money or pay $600 and get one of these Grom V-Line kits? Now, it's got 164,000 miles on it. The engine's not shaking. It's nice and quiet. These are really well-made vehicles. Stupid beauty cover off. We can see the actual engines. Now, one big deal about these engines are, unlike the V6 Acuras and Hondas, same company, these have timing chains in them. You change your oil every 5,000 miles, use full synthetic oil, they can run basically forever. But, as I warned earlier, just don't think, oh, it's a Lexus, great, I'll buy it. No, you gotta check that stuff out. Because the guy who bought one in Tennessee didn't. Those spark plugs were all burnt, showed the engine was worn out. You don't want to buy one like that. You still gotta check them out. You don't know how somebody took care of a car. In the case of this, the transmission obviously wasn't serviced correctly and it went out, but the one he's got only had 50,000 miles on it. He had the fluid and filter changed, had it put in, and it should last a really long time. Now it's Rhode Island, so you're always going to see the little corrosion. That doesn't mean anything. What means something is what's going on under the car. And just like Toyota, the Lexuses, they know how to undercoat them so they don't rust. They're not rust buckets. Toyota's been fixing that stuff pretty well since the early 90s. Other than those frames on the Tacomas and the Tundras. And those are full frame vehicles and they screwed up coating the frames. Those are full frames. These are unibody, and the unibody ones don't have any problems. You can see everything's pretty solid under here. Now, while everyone else is just going SUV, 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 Lexus, of course, is still making beautiful four-door sedans. There are quite a few people that still want sedans, myself included. It's a different ride, it's a different experience. These things are extremely zippy, fun to drive around in. The SUVs, for me, they leave a little bit to be desired, especially in terms of their rideability. They're usually a little on the rough side, and they're so high up in the air, they're not aerodynamic, so they're pretty much gas hogs. When he doesn't drive like a maniac, he can get 30 miles a gallon on the highway this thing. You're not gonna get that with the SUVs unless they're hybrids or stuff, and then you're into all that technology. This is a conventional 6-cylinder engine. Doesn't have a turbocharger. It has normal fuel injection. It puts out 272 naturally aspirated horsepower. Like I say, no turbocharger. These things can run forever if you take care of them. As far as I'm concerned, what would you rather have? A nice car like this, you get 30 miles a gallon on the highway, or some car that's got a little bitty 3-cylinder engine with gasoline direct injection and a turbocharger that, hey, maybe it gets 39 miles a gallon. Let's see what it's like when it's got 160 or 260 or 360. It'll never make it that far on that engine. It'll probably be in the junkyard by then. You can tell the quality. They got 2 hood openers, not just one cheap one, they got 2. So let's get a little data on it. There we go, ES350, 2008, through GRFE, and we'll do a full scan here. It's gone through 25 subsystems. That's got 165,000 miles. It's got a few codes, but they're probably not going to mean much of anything. Linear solenoid circuit or G-sensor fault. Don't think by any stretch of the imagination that any kind of anti-crash devices on an older car like this are going to work perfectly. He didn't even notice, but it's a code that's telling you that system isn't working perfectly. It's got a problem with the linear sensor. G-force is going on. Who cares? We'll go back. Look at the other codes. Tire pressure monitoring. Who really cares about that? But we'll see what's going on there. It's telling you the transmitter isn't working. Tire pressure monitoring. And then we can see the light's on. Tire pressure gauges cost $5. Check your tires every once in a while. You don't ever expect that kind of stuff to work. All the sensors have batteries. They can go bad. And that's what's happening here. The transmitters. Who cares? Why spend all that money? Just get yourself a gauge. And last but not least, it's got a stupid key code, a smart key. Let's see what that stupid code is. Circuit of antenna coil is open. It starts fine. It all opens. Yeah, you know, too much technology. Again, it's saying that the circuit for the antenna that picks it up for the key system isn't working, but it opens and starts, so he doesn't care. When you get to this level of technology in cars, as they get older, there's some crap like that you just live with. It isn't going to hurt anything at all, because unlike the Nissans, these push button starts on Toyota systems and Lexuses, I've been working on it for decades. You know how many of those things I've seen break? None. Not a single one. So, unlike the Nissans that I see breaking all the time and cost a fortune, these things are well made, and as long as it works, who cares? So we'll erase everything. We have to turn it off, then just turn the key on so the idiot lights are on. They're all on now. And then we back it up and go to clear all the codes. And it's going to clear them all. And they aren't hard codes because they all clear. Now, if you have a scan tool and you're checking stuff and you erase the codes, but they don't erase, then you got a hard code. Something seriously is wrong. Now, in this case, say it was the tire pressure monitors. You don't care. You just leave it alone. But if it was an engine code, you'd want to figure out what's wrong. So let's take it for a ride. So here we go. And he's got a little backup camera. The color leaves a little to be desired because it's old, but you can see where you're going at least. An old car, but the first thing you notice is this baby's quiet. It rides smooth. Now, this goes to show that you don't need a V8 in a Lexus. You remember originally, the 400s were all V8s. Like the Americans want V8s, rear-wheel drive. Well, this is a V6 front-wheel drive. And the owner was just telling me his brother's scared of this car because once they were doing 120, he says, it doesn't make any noise or anything. It's too scary. You don't need a V8 in one of these. The V6 has plenty enough power. And here we go. Burns a little rubber still. This thing's fun to drive. 164,000 miles. You wouldn't think it had 164,000 miles because they know how to make these things in Japan. And of course, if you put it in manual mode, it shifts even more, but I gotta film and drive, so that isn't gonna work out too well today. Now, the owner just informed me that when they did change the fluid when it stopped working, it was completely black because the original owner was the proverbial little old lady, and of course, at the Lexus dealer, they told her, oh, that's lifetime, don't worry about changing it, and then it went out, which is another warning. Change the stuff. It's very easy to change. Lexus is well made. Maybe you only want to change it every 50,000 miles, but you still want to change it. Dirty fluid destroys stuff. You want to change it and you won't have any problems. He lucked out with the junkyard one, and if she would have changed it, it'd probably still have the original transmission in it. Because understand one thing, many people who own Lexuses, they drive and they get tired of them, they get another one, right? And a lot of them don't do any maintenance at all on them, and they'll still run until the transmissions blow up. One time he almost got to 140 miles an hour, so you get an old lady car that wasn't maintained right and you go that fast, and it was after that the tranny went out. So you really can't blame Lexus on that. That's more maintenance. That's one reason you can get a good used Lexus, because a lot of people buy them because they're stylish and they're kind of a snobby car. It's like the only snobby Japanese car, a Lexus, right? Well, then they got to get a new one every so many years to keep up with the Joneses or the Vanderbilts if you're here in Rhode Island, right? So there's lots of good used ones out there that you still got lots of life. The thing is made in Japan, good as my wife's Lexus. It's even older. Hers is 6 years older than this thing, and it still runs like a clock. Plenty of them out there, but still, you gotta have a guy like me check it out when you get to this level of technology. You don't want to have to deal with the transmission. If you would have done what the average person with a Lexus do, they take it to the dealer, they wanted $8 grand to replace the transmission, and he only spent $3. Keep that in mind if you're gonna buy one of these things. They're great cars, but still, you gotta have a guy who knows how to work on them. Check it out. You saw there were codes on this, pretty much meaningless codes. Who cares about the tire pressure monitoring system, right? Or the G-force signals. You don't really care. What you care about is the transmission that they wanted $8 grand. So always have somebody good check it out before you buy it. Just realize there's a lot of good ones out there. And like I said, even here in Rhode Island, this thing isn't rusty because they learned how to coat them. If this had been a Ford or a Chrysler or even a Fiat, the bottom would be all rotten away. The wheels would be falling off because the control arms would be rusty and ready to come off. These aren't that way. They can run a really long time. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.